Alex chuckled. You're right. Never, ever tell Kevin that you were afraid of the stunning hooker. Can you imagine? He laughed with her.
Hello,
Your
and
turn.
welcome to the first
Another
round of this
boyfriend.
tournament.
I'm running
nice to
out.
see you.
Let's
get
see.
down on the tee.
I dated a guy named Felix for a couple of weeks in undergrad. And what extinguished the flames of your passion? You have to understand, the only place I ever met boys was in a lab. Go on. Well, Felix worked with animals, rats, mostly. He kept a lot of them in his apartment. There was a smell problem. Daniel threw his head back and howled with laughter. The sound of it was infectious. She couldn't help chortling along with him. It was not as out of control as that first afternoon in Kevin's secret lair, but it was close. All the stress seemed to drain out of her body, and she felt more relaxed than she would have thought possible in light of where she was headed. Eventually, Daniel fell asleep, mid-sentence, as he described his fifth-grade crush. He'd been fighting his droopy eyelids for a while, and she suspected again that he'd been trying to keep her mind off the negatives. It was relaxing to have him sleeping peacefully next to her. Einstein was snoring on the back seat, a nice counterpoint to the even sound of Daniel's breathing. She knew she should be thinking of a variety of plans, ways to get Karsten without exposing herself too greatly, but she just wanted to enjoy the moment. Peace was going to be a limited commodity in her near future. If this was the last moment that she got to be entirely content, then she wanted to experience it fully. She was in a rare state of calm when she woke Daniel a few hours later as they were entering the outskirts of D.C. The last time she'd pulled into the city, she'd been furious and terrified. She probably had even more reason to feel that way today, but she was still enjoying the time she had left alone with Daniel, and she wasn't going to let that go before she had to. Daniel read the directions to her as she got closer to their target. As she'd originally thought, this was a nice neighborhood, and it was only getting nicer. Wasn't that like Kevin, to hide somewhere so incongruous? She circled the building with the matching address twice, doubting whether this could be the place. I'd better call him. Daniel handed her the phone. She hit redial, and it rang once. You're late, Kevin answered. What's wrong now? Traffic. Nothing. I think we're outside, but this place doesn't look right. Why? We're hiding out in a fancy Art Deco high-rise? Yeah. A friend of mine is letting us crash. There's parking under the building. Go to the 4th level down. I'll meet you. He disconnected. She handed the phone back to Daniel. Just once, I want to hang up on him first. You did the very first time he called, remember? Fairly spectacularly. Oh, right. That does make me feel better. All the tension came back as they rounded the corner into the parking garage, and the daylight disappeared. She drove in a claustrophobic downward spiral until she reached the right level, and then saw Kevin standing impatiently beside an empty space marked Residents Only. He waved her into it. She braced herself as she opened the door, expecting a few snide comments about her face or disparaging observations about Daniel's screw-ups, but Kevin said only, Don't mind the cameras. I took them offline this morning, and then opened the back of the SUV to let Einstein out. There was a real reunion with Einstein, who threw Kevin to the ground and attempted to lick the skin off his face. Trying to pretend that she wasn't the slightest bit jealous of Einstein's affection for his man, Alex ignored them both until she and Daniel were loaded up with as much as they could carry. Which way? She asked. Kevin got up with a sigh. Follow me. To his credit, he did grab the remaining duffel bags as they went to the elevator. Do I need a hat? Alex asked. Is there a lobby?
Unlucky.
I'm not exactly ready for my close-up.
Pretty deep stuff here.
No worries, Allie.
Give it a good hack.
Let's go straight to the apartment.
In the right direction.
By the way, bro, nice beard. It's a good look on you, in that you don't look like you as much anymore. Thanks? About this friend, Alex began. Kevin sighed again. They can't all be Arnie's. Sorry, Shorty. This might get rough. You don't trust him? The elevator opened into a plush hallway, or was it an anteroom? There was only one door in the space. I've paid her through next week, so I trust her about that far. The hair on the back of Alex's neck stood up. Daniel had gotten her more used to human interaction, but she knew she still had some pretty severe people issues. As they walked the length of the short hall, she struggled with the duffel in her right hand, trying to free some fingers so she could pull a syringe from her belt. Just as she caught hold of the one she wanted, Daniel touched her wrist.
Back on the fairway.
She glanced up,
Let's see about hitting
and he was giving her a look that seemed to imply she was overreacting. Frowning, she slid the syringe back into place. It wouldn't take long to draw it if the need arose anyway. Kevin had a key to the single door. He took a deep breath as he pushed it open. At first, Alex wasn't sure they hadn't stumbled into the lobby after all, because she'd never been inside an apartment with a wide marble staircase up to another story. The place was lavish, sleek, and modern, and lined with floor-to-ceiling windows that immediately had her feeling exposed. Through the glass, the sun was just beginning to droop toward the DC skyline. There didn't seem to be any other apartments close enough to look into this one, but a telescope would make it possible,
we're almost
or
there.
a rifle sight. No! A hard but somehow still velvety voice announced from behind them. Alex whirled. The apartment stretched back the other way, too, wrapping around the front door and the hallway beyond. On one side was a huge white kitchen, on the other a dining room with seating for 10, with more window walls framing each. Leaning against the marble kitchen island was the most exquisite human being Alex had ever seen in real life. The woman looked exactly like a facetious description Alex had conjured up to describe Kevin's improbable mental image of the oleander. She had honey blonde hair, thick and long, that stood out from her head in full waves like a Disney cartoon's. Sapphire blue doe eyes, full red lips turned up at the corners, and a straight, narrow nose, all set with flawless symmetry in an oval face with prominent cheekbones. Swan neck over elegant collarbones. Of course, the generous hourglass figure with a tiny waist and legs that seemed longer than Alex's entire body. The woman was wearing only a short, black kimono and an irritated expression. "It's temporary," Kevin said in a conciliatory voice. "Obviously, I'll pay you the same for each of them. 3 times what we originally agreed on." The surreally perfect woman raised one eyebrow and looked pointedly at Einstein.
Let's see what happens
here.
His
tail was wagging furiously. He stared up at the blonde with the proverbial puppy dog eyes. 4 times, Kevin promised. He dropped the bags he was carrying. "You like dogs." "Kate?" Daniel asked suddenly, surprised recognition saturating his tone. The woman's face dimpled into a toothpaste commercial quality smile. "Hi, Danny," she purred. "I almost didn't know you with all that scruff. Well, that does make me feel better. You left a nasty welt on my ego, but at least you didn't forget me." "It's, nice to see you again," Daniel stammered, flummoxed by her greeting.
No good.
The blonde's eyes cut to Kevin. "Okay, he can stay." "It's just a few nights," Kevin said. "I need the little one, too." "You know I don't like women in my space," she said in a flat voice, flicking her eyes to Alex, then back to Kevin. "Oh, that's okay. Allie's not a real girl," Kevin assured her. Daniel dropped his bags and took half a step forward before Alex hooked the back of his shirt with her one free finger. "Not now," she muttered. Kate, or whatever her real name was, shrugged gracefully away from the island and glided toward them. She looked down her nose at Alex, easy to do, as she was a good foot taller. "So what happened to your face? Your boyfriend tune you up?" Daniel stiffened. Alex wasn't sure what this was. Maybe some kind of territorial thing?
For the birdie.
It was only a guess. Alex didn't have a lot of experience with other women. In the distant past, she'd suffered through a couple of immature roommates, liked a few other lady science geeks, and made small talk with the rare female underling who didn't flee her presence. Mostly, she'd worked with men, and she didn't know all the rules for double X chromosome interactions. At a loss, she went with the truth, though she probably should have waited to see what Kevin had told the woman. No, it was a mafia assassin. Alex worked her jaw, feeling the bandage pull against her skin. Oh, and the older stuff was just Kevin trying to kill me. If I'd actually been trying to kill you, you'd be dead,
That
Kevin grumbled.
was absolutely
Alex rolled her eyes.
putting.
What,
Okay,
you want to go
one
another
under for
round?
the round?
Kevin demanded. Anytime, sweetheart. The next
Okay,
time
it's
I put
time
you
to send
down,
this ball on
Alex
its
promised,
way.
it will be permanently. Kevin laughed, not derisively like she expected, but with genuine delight. See what I mean, Val? The woman looked like she was trying not to smile. Okay, you've piqued my interest, but I have only the one extra room. Ollie's good at roughing it. Whatever, the woman said. Apparently it was an agreement. Get all that mess out of my living room. She skimmed close by Daniel as she passed them. Without a
Heading
backward
for the
glance, she headed
green here.
upstairs. The kimono was very short, and both brothers watched her climb with partially open mouths. You turned her down?
For the birdie
Alex muttered
here.
under her breath. Kevin heard her and laughed again. Let's move this stuff before she kicks us all out. The extra bedroom was bigger than Alex's entire DC apartment had been. And it wasn't as if she'd been living in a dive. Her place was what real estate agents described as a luxury apartment. This place, though, was several degrees beyond mere luxury. Kevin had seemed on the level when he said the woman was a hooker, but Alex hadn't had any idea that profession could pay so well. Kevin stacked the duffels against one wall. Ollie, you still got that cot, right? There's a huge walk-in closet off the bathroom. Check it out and see if it will work for you. You could set up on one of those couches out there, but it might be best to keep you out of Val's line of sight as much as
And that'll
possible.
keep you at one under for the round.
Of course Alex will sleep in the bed, Daniel said. Kevin's eyebrows pulled together skeptically.
And from the fifth
Really?
hole tee
You're
off.
gonna get all chivalrous about Ollie? It's like you never even met our mother. Relax, Alex said as Kevin bridled. We'll work it out. Fine, Kevin said. Should I have been more careful with my words out there? Alex asked Kevin. You said she's not trustworthy. Kevin shook his head. No, you're fine. Val might kick us all into the street when she's tired of us, but she won't sell us out. I've bought her time and her discretion. What happens with Val stays with Val. She has a reputation to protect. Okay, Alex agreed, though she wasn't sure she entirely understood Val's policies. He moved to the door, then paused with his hand on the knob. There's plenty of food in the fridge if you're hungry, or we can order something in. Thanks, Alex said. I'll sort my stuff out first. Yes, Daniel said. Let us get situated. Kevin hesitated one more second, then stepped back into the room. Danny, I just wanted to say, it's good to see you. I'm glad you're safe. Like before, as he was leaving the ranch, Kevin looked like he wouldn't be opposed to a hug. Daniel stood awkwardly, his body language full of ambivalence. Yes, well, thanks to Alex, Daniel said. And I'm glad you're not dead like she thought you were. Kevin barked a laugh. Yeah, me too. And thanks again, Poison Woman. I owe you one. He exited on another laugh, leaving the door cracked behind him. Daniel gave Alex a long stare, then went to the door
Pretty good
and
distance out of
quietly
that
shut
fairway
it all the
bunker, I'm
way.
pleased.
He turned back to her, and there was clearly an argument about to begin. She shook her head and motioned him to follow her farther into the guest suite. For a second, the bathroom made her forget why she'd come this way. A swimming pool-sized tub was set into the floor, surrounded by marble and a faintly blue tile wall that shimmered like a pale sea. A shower head the diameter of a truck tire was suspended from the ceiling over it. What
This one's a beauty.
is this place? Alex gasped. Daniel shut the door behind them. Kate, or rather Val, is apparently quite successful.
At 2 under for the round.
Do you think she's really a prostitute, or was that just Kevin trying to make the story better? I didn't
Put
come
this
in
drive
here
in
to
the
talk
fairway.
about Val. She turned to face him, her lips twisting sideways into a pucker. Alex, I don't like lying to him. Who's lied? Acting, then, pretending that we're nothing to each other. She huffed a sigh. I'm just not ready to deal with the inevitable reaction. I have enough stress. We're going to have to tell him eventually. Why not get it over with? He saw her expression change as she weighed the options. You still don't believe we have an eventually,
well, I guess you can't hit all
do
the
you?
fairways.
He accused. Well, there is a good possibility either he or
Okay,
I
you're
will
kind
be
of
dead
in
within the
some
next
deep
week.
stuff. This
So
is the danger
why
zone.
rock the boat? Daniel abruptly pulled her into a rough hug that was somehow more reproachful than comforting. Don't say that. I can't stand to hear you talk that way. Sorry, she said into his shirt. We can run away. Tonight. We'll hide. You know how. Can we at least wait till we've slept and eaten? She asked plaintively. He laughed unwillingly at her tone. I suppose I could allow that much. She relaxed into him for a moment, wishing again that running were the right option. It sounded so much easier, restful almost. Let's just walk out there, hand in hand, Daniel suggested, and then make out on the sofa for a bit. First,
Great
eating and
contact.
sleeping. I am not dealing with the aftermath of some grand reveal until I'm sure I've considered all the possible forms the backlash might take
On the
and
green.
whether
Lot
I
of work
need
to
to
do
be
now.
armed, or rather how armed I need to be. I can't even think straight right now. All right, he said. I'll give you tonight because I know how exhausted you are, but we're revisiting this discussion in the morning, and I intend to be quite inflexible. Will Kevin be in here too? She wondered. The woman said there was only one extra room. That won't make discussing anything very easy. I doubt it. She could hear the eye roll in his voice, and she pulled away to look at his face. He didn't let her go, but he dropped his arms to rest more casually around her waist. Oh, do you think she meant this was the only empty extra room? No, I think he's staying with her. She wrinkled her nose. Really? She didn't seem to like him very much. The women in his
Wow,
life
that was
do.
just awesome. Huge putt.
She was still
3 under for the
unconvinced.
round.
But she could do so much better. Daniel laughed. I won't
7th
argue
hole
with
coming
that.
up.
Chapter 24. Val's huge double fridge was much better stocked than Arnie's. In fact, it was much better stocked than the average restaurants. It looked like she was planning to feed a dozen more guests than those she already had in residence, though she apparently had not been apprised of Alex and Daniel's existence until moments before they arrived. The incongruity bothered Alex a little, but not enough
Looks
to
like this is
deter
a
her
beauty.
from the bowl of grapes. She felt like she hadn't eaten anything fresh in weeks, though it really hadn't been so very long. The ranch seemed months
Okay,
ago.
we're about 17
She could
feet
barely
out
wrap
here.
her head around how short the time actually was. Alex sat on one of the pure white ultra-modern bar stools. It wasn't terribly comfortable. Daniel was humming with pleasure as he examined the accoutrement. Now this is a kitchen, he murmured. He started sorting through the lower drawers, evaluating the pots and pans available. Making ourselves right at home, are we? Daniel jerked upright. Alex paused with a grape halfway to her mouth. Val came into the room laughing, still in the brief kimono. Relax. All this stuff is here for you. I don't really use this room. Thank you, Daniel said. She shrugged. Kevin paid
And
for
that'll
it.
keep you at 3 under
So you
for the
like to
round.
cook? I dabble. He's being modest, Alex told her. He's a 5-star chef.
Here we go.
Val smiled warmly at Daniel as she stretched her whole torso across the island toward him, so her chin nearly touched the marble. Well, that's nice. I've never had a live-in chef before. It sounds fun. Alex wondered how Val was able to load so many different implications into one common word. I suppose so, Daniel said, flushing a little. Where's Kevin? Walking the dog. Val turned her face toward Alex, and Alex braced for more
Now
aggression.
that was a swing.
I asked Kevin about you. Kevin says you tortured him. Val jerked her head toward Daniel. Well, technically
Right
that's correct.
around
It was a case of mistaken
230
identity, though.
yards to go
Val's
here.
eyes glowed with interest. What did you do? Did you burn him? What? No, I used injectable chemical treatments. I find them more effective and they don't leave scars. Val rolled her body sideways along the marble, so she was turned to Daniel again, then pillowed her head against her arm. The kimono was partially dislodged by this maneuver, and Alex imagined his view was quite interesting. He stood awkwardly, one hand on the refrigerator door. Was it really painful? Val demanded. Beyond anything I'd ever imagined, Daniel admitted. Val seemed fascinated. Did you scream? Did you beg? Did you writhe? Daniel couldn't help but smile at her enthusiasm. All of the above, I believe. Oh, and I cried like a baby as well. Still smiling, he seemed suddenly comfortable. He turned back to the fridge and started rummaging. Val sighed. I really wish I could have seen that. You're into torture? Alex asked, hiding her concern. Of course Kevin would move them in with a true sadist. Not torture, per se, but it's so intoxicating, isn't it? That kind of power. I guess I've never looked at it quite that way. Val cocked her head to the side, looking at Alex with undisguised interest. Isn't everything about power? Alex thought about it for a moment. Not in my experience. Back when that was my job, honestly, it sounds naive now, even to me, I was really just trying to save people. There was always a lot hanging in the balance. It was stressful. Val considered that, pursing her lips. That does sound naive. Alex shrugged. It never gave you a rush? Being in control? Val's wide lapis eyes bored into her. Alex wondered if people felt this way in a psychiatrist's office, this compulsion to speak. Or maybe it was more like being shackled to Alex's own table. I mean, maybe. I'm not a very dangerous person on the surface.
Round.
I guess there were times that I appreciated the respect. Val nodded.
Ninth hole coming up.
Tell me, have you ever tortured a woman? Twice. Well, once and a half. Explain. Daniel's head was leaning back as he adjusted the flame under the stovetop grill. He was paying close attention. Alex hated talking about this in front of him. I didn't actually have to do anything to the first girl. She was confessing before she was even strapped to the table. She didn't belong in my lab anyway. Any normal interrogation would have gotten the same results. Poor kid. What was she confessing to? A terrorist cell was trying to coerce some suicide bombers in New York. They'd kidnap someone's family back in Iran, in this case her parents, and kill the hostages if the subject wouldn't do as directed. The NSA had it under control before any of the bombs were detonated, but they lost several of the hostages. She sighed. It's always messy with terrorists. What about the second? That was an entirely different situation. Arms dealer. Was she tough to break? One of the toughest in my career. Val smiled as if the answer greatly pleased her. I've always thought that women can handle a lot more pain than the so-called stronger sex. Men are all just oversized children, really. Then she sighed. I've made men beg, and I've made them writhe, and maybe there have been some tears here and there, but no one's ever cried like a baby. Her full lower lip pushed out into a pout. I'm positive they would if you asked them to, Alex encouraged. Val smiled her glittery smile. You're probably right. Daniel was chopping something now. Alex decided she should slow down on the grapes. Dinner was sure to be worth the wait. Val rolled to the side again to watch him, and Alex felt a sudden urge to distract her. This is a beautiful place. Yes, it's nice,
That's
isn't it?
gonna have to hit something.
A friend gave it to me. Oh,
I'm not right
does
all
she
the
stay here
time,
often?
but I definitely
How
was
many
this
people
time.
were going to know about them? She'd already been stupidly and bizarrely honest with this strange woman. It would surely come back to bite her. No. Zhang and I broke up ages ago. He was too stuffy. And he let you keep the place? Val stared at Alex, disbelieving. Let me? What kind of a gift is it if the deed's not in your name? That's a good point, Alex agreed quickly. What was that you were saying
And
earlier?
that'll keep you at
about
2
putting
under
Kevin
for the
down?
round.
Oh, can I tell the story, please? Daniel butted in. It's my favorite.
All right, let's let her
Daniel
rip.
stretched the story out, milking it for Val's laughs and coos. He made Alex sound more in control than she had been and fictionalized the parts he wasn't awake for. It was a better story his way, she had to admit. Val's expression as she assessed Alex now was 180 degrees from what it had been at their first meeting. Then the food was ready, and Alex stopped caring about much else. It had been a while since she'd had red meat, and her inner carnivore took over. When she came out of the frenzy, she saw that Val was watching her again, engrossed. Alex glanced down. Daniel had given Val a plate too, but she'd eaten only a few slivers off the side of her steak. "Do you always eat so much?" Val asked. "When it's available, I guess.
So,
when Daniel
we have
is
about
cooking,
165
definitely."
yards to go still.
Val's eyes narrowed. "I'll bet you never gain an ounce, do you?" "I don't know. I probably must sometimes, right?" "Do you even own a scale?" she demanded. "Why would I?" Alex asked, confused. Val blew out a puff of breath that ruffled the waves of hair over her forehead. "People with naturally high metabolisms piss me off." "Seriously?" Alex said, looking her up and down. "You're going to complain to me about our relative genetic heritages?" Val stared at her for a few seconds, then smiled and shook her head. "Well, I suppose a girl can't have everything. And you're just the exception that proves the rule? I think I like you, Ollie." "Thanks, Val. It's actually Alex, though." "Whatever. You know, you've got a lot of untapped potential. With decent hair, some makeup, and a mid-sized boob job, you could do all right." I do fine, as is, thanks. I have lower expectations out of life. It makes things easier." "Seriously, you cut your own hair, don't you?" "I don't have another option." "Trust me, there's always another option to this." She stretched across the counter and tried to touch the hair hanging in Alex's eyes, but Alex flinched out of her way.
Yes.
It was true that it was time for another trim.
3 under for
Val
the
turned
round.
to Daniel, who was trying to be unobtrusive, leaning against the counter directly behind Val as he finished his food.
Okay, it's
almost
time to
like
send
he
this
was
ball
hiding
on
from
its
her.
way.
Well, Alex could understand that, and she completely understood why Daniel had found Val frightening on their first meeting. "Back me up, Danny. Don't you think Ollie could be pretty if she tried?" Daniel did the blinking thing he always did when taken by surprise. "But Alex is pretty now." "What a gentleman. It's like your bizarro Kevin." "I'll take that as a compliment." "It is a compliment. Maybe the best I've ever given," Val agreed. "How long have you known him?"
you
Daniel
smashed
wondered.
that.
"Too long. I don't know why I keep opening the door when he comes begging. I guess it's that power thing." She shrugged,
All right,
and one shoulder of
145
her
yards
silk
out.
robe slid down her arm. She didn't fix it. "I like watching someone so strong have to do what I say." A key jangled in the front door. Alex slipped from the stool to her feet, muscles tensing automatically. Val watched as Daniel looked to Alex, tensing too, ready to follow her lead. "You two are funny," she murmured. Einstein ran panting into the kitchen, and Alex relaxed. Val eyed the dog, his tongue lolling out and his eyes eager. "Does it want something?" "He's probably thirsty," Alex told her. "Oh." She
Could
glanced
be in the
around the
rough
kitchen,
here.
then grabbed a decorative crystal bowl from the center of the island and filled it in the sink. Einstein licked her hands gratefully and then started lapping up the water. "Smells good," Kevin commented as he came around the corner. "You can finish mine," Val said without looking at him. "I'm done." Experimentally, she stroked one of Einstein's ears. Kevin leaned comfortably against the island, looking very at home as he started cutting into Val's food. "Everyone getting along?" "You were right," Val answered. Kevin grinned triumphantly. "I told you she wouldn't bore you." Val straightened up and smiled back. "Anyone who's chained you to the floor is bound to get along with me." Kevin's grin disappeared. "It was a draw." Val threw back her chin and laughed, her long neck looking even more swan-like than before. Daniel turned the sink on and rummaged for dish soap.
Okay, so that'll keep
Alex
you at
joined him
3 under for
automatically,
the round.
comforted by even just the opening chords of their usual routine. Once
Here we go.
again, she was in an
Let's pop this in the
unfamiliar
fairway.
place, well out of her league, unsure and unsafe. But with Daniel there, she could handle it. He was like a gas mask, a touchstone of refuge. She smiled to herself, thinking how little he would care for that comparison. Well, she wasn't the romantic one. "Oh, don't bother with that, sweetie," Val told Daniel. "The housekeeper comes every morning." Alex shot Kevin a loaded glance, which Val caught. "I'll leave a note on the counter, and he'll stay out of the bedrooms," Val assured her. "I know this is all very cloak and dagger. Don't worry, you won't be exposed on my account." "I don't mind," Daniel said. "Dishes relax me." "What is this brother of yours?" Val asked Kevin. "Can I keep him?" Alex smiled when she saw Daniel's eyes widen in panic, but he kept his face down over the sink so Val didn't see. He handed Alex a clean pair of tongs, and she dried them with a dish towel that felt like silk and was probably meant to be ornamental. She had a feeling Val didn't care about things like that. "He's not your type," Kevin answered. "I have many types, though, don't I?" "Fair enough, but I don't think he'll hold your interest long." She sighed. "They so rarely do." "So, back to this housekeeper. What time will he arrive, leave, etc.?" Alex asked. Val laughed. "You take things very seriously." "People try to kill me a lot." "That must get irritating," she said casually. "When I'm in residence, Raoul comes early and leaves quickly. He won't even wake you. He's good. I'll just lock the door then, if you like." "We're not sleeping in tomorrow, Ollie," Kevin interjected. "There's a lot to get set before we act, and I don't want to waste more time." "Give her the one morning off," Daniel insisted. "She's been driving all night for a week, sleeping in the back of cars. She needs rest." Kevin made a disgusted face. "She's not a child, Danny. The big kids have work to do." "It's not a problem," Alex said quickly. She glanced at the clock on the oven. It was only 7. "I'm crashing now anyway, so I'm sure I'll be up long before Raoul arrives."
Okay,
"I'll
let's
walk
see
you
what
through
you
my
can do with his
inventory,
8-footer.
and you can tell me what else you need. I've got the video footage of your subject, which I'm sure you'll want to review, and then—" "Tomorrow, Kevin," Alex interrupted. "Now, sleep." Kevin inhaled noisily through his nose and rolled his eyes to the ceiling. Alex almost reached for Daniel's hand as she left the
Nice putt
kitchen.
there.
She had to curl her fingers into a fist and hope Kevin hadn't noticed.
And that'll keep you at
It felt
3 under for the
unnatural,
round.
and she knew Daniel felt it too. He followed close behind her, almost as if he were
Okay, here
thinking
we
about doing
go.
something to instigate the conversation, or possible altercation, that she was trying to avoid. Not now. She tried to communicate to him telepathically, without turning. She walked faster, but it was a wasted effort. Daniel's legs were too long for her to build any kind of lead. She felt much better when she heard him close the door behind him and click the lock into place. "Thanks," she said, turning to wrap her arms around his waist. "Only because we're exhausted," he reminded her. "I will be much more tenacious tomorrow." She was really dragging, so she went through only the most important parts of the routine. She didn't want to bother with rebandaging her face, so she decided to let her skin breathe for the night. The wound was still bright red and puckered, and the stitches in her ear, though
This one's looking
she'd
good.
used a flesh-toned suture thread, were hard to miss. It looked like the two halves of her lobe would rejoin, though. She'd have a nasty scar, but she
Okay,
didn't
so
want
we
to
have
think about
about
that now.
115 yards.
She thought about setting up the cot in the
thereabouts, to
closet for
pin.
show, but decided to wait till morning. It wasn't like Kevin was going to do a room inspection. She also considered stringing a gas canister line around the door. She didn't think she had the energy, and anyway, an intruder would surely check the master first, if he got past Einstein. She settled for putting her cig and belt on the bedside table. Daniel was in the bed before her, but he was still awake. "Should I leave my rifle out, do you think?" he asked. "It's a big room, but probably a little tight for the rifle. I can go grab the shotgun." He gave her an exasperated look.
All right,
"I was
34 feet to the
joking."
hole.
"Oh, right." He held his arms open for her. She switched off the lamp and climbed into her now usual place. The bed was absurd, some kind of soft, supportive cloud that was probably made from spun gold or unicorn mane. "Good night, Alex," he whispered into her hair. And then she was asleep. She woke while it was still dark outside. The faint light glowing from around the edges of the shades was the unnatural yellow-green of city lights. She couldn't see a clock, but she'd guess it was around 4. A solid night's rest, and then some. She was glad. Today would be long. For years now, all she'd been doing was running and surviving. Now she had to shift into a more proactive mode, and she dreaded it. There had been her one uncharacteristic adventure in Texas, but she blamed that on the adrenaline of the moment and the unfamiliar responsibility of having a liability.
3 under for the round.
It wasn't something she would ever have planned to do. So when Daniel,
14th
woken
hole
by her
coming up.
movements, started to kiss her throat, she didn't mind procrastinating for a bit. She wondered what it would be like to be a normal person, to be able to expect that mornings like this, waking up with someone you'd chosen, would happen over and over again. To go through the day certain that you'd lie back down at the end of it in the same bed with that same person next to you. She doubted many people appreciated that certainty when they
Heading
had it.
for the green
It would
here.
be too much a part of everyday life to them, taken for granted, not something they would think of feeling grateful for.
Nicely done. Solid approach.
Well,
all right, 13
she
footer
couldn't
here.
count on another morning like this, but she could be grateful for it now. She yanked on his t-shirt, and he pulled his hands out of her hair long enough to remove it. Alex tugged her own shirt out of the way, greedy for the feeling of his skin next to hers. His kisses, which had begun so tenderly, started to veer more toward the unrestrained, though she could almost hear him reminding himself to be careful with her. She didn't want any of that. She kissed him back in a way designed to make him forget any other consideration. There was no sound, no warning. She didn't hear the lock turn or the door open. And then suddenly, the metallic click of a gun safety sliding off just inches from her head. She froze and felt Daniel do the same. She wasn't sure if he'd recognized the quiet click as she had, or was just responding to her. From the sound, she knew the intruder was closer to the nightstand holding her gun than she was. She cursed herself for
4
neglecting
under for
basic
the round.
security and worked to think of any move left to her. Maybe if she tried to spin and kick the gun away, it would give
All right,
Daniel time to get
let's
around
let her
him.
rip.
And then the intruder spoke.
Step away from the civilian, you poisonous little snake!
She blew out the huge gasp of air she'd been holding in. Whew. Okay, let's put the gun down now, psychopath.
Not until you get off my brother. This is so far beyond crossing the line, I don't even know what to call it.
Daniel said in a harsh tone.
Did you pick the lock? Danny, listen to me. She's drugged you again. That's what's happening here.
As if I would waste my limited supply on recreation, she muttered. She rolled, tugging the sheet up to cover herself, and reached for the lamp. She felt the cool barrel of the gun
Heading
press
towards
into
the
her
beach
forehead.
here. Not the good
You're
kind.
ridiculous, she told him as she switched the light on. Kevin stepped back, blinking in the light. He still had his long, silenced pistol aimed at her face. The bed rocked as Daniel vaulted agilely over her body and placed himself between her and Kevin.
What are you doing? Don't point that at her. Daniel, I don't know what she has you on, but we'll get it out of your system, I promise. Come with me. If you know what is good for you, you will turn around and walk away now. I'm saving you here. Thanks, but no thanks. I was quite happy with what I was doing before you so rudely interrupted. I'd like to return to it. Shut the door behind you.
What's happened? Alex asked, yanking her t-shirt on. There was no time for this squabbling. Kevin was wearing only a pair of pajama pants, so whatever the catalyst was, he hadn't had time to prepare himself. It wasn't like Kevin to let something, even something this offensive to him, distract him when there was trouble. She leaned around Daniel to grab her belt and then wrapped it around her waist as she spoke. Do we need to move? She reached for the cig next and shoved it into the back of her belt. Kevin's gun lowered slowly, and he started to look less confident as he was confronted with her practicality.
I didn't believe her, so I came to check,
He admitted, suddenly sheepish.
I wasn't planning on Danny ever knowing I was here.
Her? Daniel asked.
Val. She said you two were together. She was so sure of herself. I said there was no way in hell.
His voice was outraged again by the end. Daniel exhaled, irritated.
Well, I hope you made some kind of bet, with a very humiliating consequence for losing. This is punishment enough,
Kevin grumbled.
in all seriousness.
Daniel said.
Get out, Kevin. I can't believe this, Danny. What are you thinking? After what she did to you.
Daniel was still between Alex and Kevin, so she couldn't see his face, but she could suddenly hear a smile in his voice.
You're supposed to be so tough, so dangerous, and yet you're saying you'd let a little pain come between you and the woman you wanted? Really?
Kevin rocked a step back and took a few seconds to respond.
But why? Why do you want her?
The anger had vanished. When he looked at Alex, there was only bewilderment.
I'll explain it to you when
And
you've
that'll
grown
keep you
up.
at 4 under
Now
for
for
the
the last
round.
time, get out! Or
And he reached one long arm around Alex's body and
16th
pulled the
hole coming
gun
up
from her
here.
back.
Let us see
I'll
what you can
shoot
do.
you.
He pointed the gun at Kevin's torso. The safety is off on that, Alex murmured.
Counting on it.
Daniel replied. Kevin stared at them. Daniel holding the gun steady, Alex watching from behind his arm, and then his shoulders squared again. He pointed at Alex with his free hand.
You. Just stop.
He waved his hand in a big, inclusive gesture, taking in the two of them and the bed.
All of this. We leave in 15. Be ready.
His hand shifted to Danny.
No good.
He blew out a deep breath, shook his head, and then turned and walked out the door. He didn't bother closing it.
Damn it, Val!
He shouted as he headed through the dark hall, as if all of this were somehow her fault. Einstein barked from upstairs. Alex sighed and stretched. Well, that went about exactly as I thought it would. No shots fired. This was the best-case scenario, I guess.
Where are you going?
Daniel asked. To shower. You heard the man. 15 minutes.
It's the middle of the night.
All the better to hide my face. You're not tired, are you? I think we've been asleep for 9 hours at least. Daniel scowled.
No, I'm not in the least bit tired.
Well then. She started toward the bathroom door.
Wait.
Daniel jumped up, ruffling his hair as he walked to the bedroom door. He shut it and then locked it
Great
again.
contact. Nice
What's
swing.
the point of that, really? Alex asked. Daniel shrugged.
Touché.
He walked to her and wrapped his hands around her upper arms, holding her securely.
I wasn't ready to get out of bed.
Kevin's not going to knock, she reminded him.
Oh,
He
you're
probably
getting there.
won't
You're
even give me
getting
the full
there. In the rough,
15.
but we're close to the green.
I don't like letting him call the shots. Not only was I not ready to get out of bed, I was not ready for you to get out of bed either.
He bent his head down to kiss her, his hands running slowly up her shoulders till they were cradling her face. She knew that under normal circumstances, it would have taken very little convincing on his part to get her to agree, but these were not normal circumstances. And the idea that Kevin might walk into the room at any moment, probably with gun in hand again,
Okay, so
tempered
that'll
her
keep you at
response.
4 under for
She
the
pulled
round.
back. What about a compromise? The look he gave her
Coming
was
off
less
a
than
par
thrilled.
on the last one.
I
Let's see what
categorically
happens here.
refuse to compromise in any way for Kevin's sake.
Can I please at least make my case before you dismiss it? He kept his expression stern, but she could tell he wanted to smile.
Do what you have to do, but I will not be swayed.
We have limited time, and we both need to clean up. That shower/lap pool in there will easily fit 2. Well, actually, it could fit 12.
I don't know if this has enough.
And I was thinking we could multitask. The hard-line expression disappeared.
I immediately withdraw my opposition and offer my full cooperation.
I thought you might see it that way. Chapter 25.
Because there's no reason for you to go.
Kevin objected. Kevin stood in front of the elevator doors, blocking the call button, arms crossed over his chest.
Why not?
Daniel demanded.
You're not going to be part of the offensive, Danny, so you don't need to be part of the preparation.
Daniel's lips mashed together into a scowl, and his neck started to turn red. It doesn't hurt anything for him, Alex began mildly.
Except someone could see his face, Kevin growled. You mean your face? She countered.
Okay, let's
I'm
see what
smart
you can
enough
do
to
with
keep
his
my head
8-footer.
down. Daniel rolled his eyes. I'll ride in the trunk if you want. Kevin evaluated the two of them for a long second. Are you going to let me focus? What do you mean? Alex asked. Kevin closed his eyes. He seemed to be calming himself. He inhaled through his nose, then looked at Daniel. Here are my requirements for you to join us on this very boring standard recon exercise. No
Nice
one will
putt,
speak
you're
of
in
what
there.
happened this morning. I will not be forced to remember the
And that'll keep you
nauseating
at
things
4
I
under for the
witnessed.
round.
There will be no discussion that might allude to said nauseating things. This is business.
All right, let's haul
and
off
you will conduct
and
yourself
just
appropriately.
smash this next
Agreed?
drive.
Daniel's neck started to flush. She was sure he was going to mention the fact that if Kevin hadn't broken into a locked room in the middle of the night, he wouldn't have seen anything. Before Daniel could object, Alex said, Agreed. Appropriate businesslike behavior. Kevin glanced back and forth between them, measuring again. After a second, he turned and hit the call button.
That was amazing.
Daniel gave her a, really? Look. Alex shrugged.
None of that,
Kevin commanded, though he still had his back to them. What? Daniel complained.
I can feel you two silently communicating. Stop it.
It was a quiet drive in the average-looking black sedan. She didn't know if it was Val's car or something Kevin had acquired. It didn't seem like Val's style, but maybe she liked to be incognito sometimes. Alex appreciated the heavily tinted windows. She felt less exposed as she sat with her ball cap pulled low over her face and stared out at the still mostly sleeping city. They were early enough to beat the morning rush. Kevin drove through a seedier
Nice.
section of town, more the kind of neighborhood she would have expected his hiding place to exist in. He pulled in at a storage facility that seemed to be mostly enormous cargo containers. There was no guard posted,
Okay, you're on
just
the
a
green with
keypad and a heavy metal
whole lot
gate
of work
with
to do.
razor wire coils on top. Kevin drove them to a spot near the back of the fenced lot and parked behind a dingy orange container. The lot appeared to be empty, but Alex kept her face down and her walk unfeminine as they moved to the wide double doors that made up the front wall of the container. Kevin plugged a complicated sequence of numbers into the heavy-duty rectangular lock, then pulled it out of the way. He opened one door just a few feet and waved them inside. It was black when Kevin pulled the door shut behind himself. Then there was a low click, and rope lights lining the ceiling and the floor glowed to life. Exactly how many bat caves do you have? Alex demanded.
4 under
Just
at
a
the
few
end of
here
your
and
round.
there,
Not too
where I might
shabby.
need them.
Thanks
Kevin
a lot
said.
for playing.
This one's mobile,
We'll see you next
so
time.
that helps.